of such attachment and aversion because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Purport. Those, those who are in Krishna conscious self-realization. Path of self-realization. Sorry?
Can you read that again, please?
Yeah.
Those who
Are
are
principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Is it correct, sir?
Yes,
Okay.
a real purport now.
Yeah. Purport. Those who are in Krishna consciousness are naturally reluctant to engage in material sense gratification. But those who are not in such consciousness should follow the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures. Unrestricted sense enjoyment is the cause of material engagement, but one who follows the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures does not become entangled by the sense objects. For example, sex enjoyment is a necessity for the conditioned soul, and sex enjoyment is allowed under the license of marriage ties. According to scriptural injunctions, one is forbidden to engage in sex relationships with any women other than one's wife. All other women are to be considered as one's mother. But in spite of such injunctions, a man is still inclined to have sex relationships with other women. These propensities are to be curbed. Otherwise, they will be stumbling blocks on the path of self realization. As long as the material body is there, the necessities of the material body are allowed, but under the rules and regulations. And yet, one, and yet, we should not rely upon the control of such allowances. One has to follow those rules and regulations unattached to them because practice of sense gratification under regulations may also lead one to go astray. As much as there is always the chance of an accident, even on the royal roads. Although they may be very carefully maintained, no one can guarantee that there will be no danger even on the safest road. The sense enjoyment spirit has been current a very long time, owing to material association. Therefore, in spite of regulated sense enjoyment, there is every chance of falling down. Therefore, any attachment for regulated sense enjoyment must also be avoided by all means. But attachment to Krishna consciousness or acting always in the loving service of Krishna detaches one from all kinds of sensory activities. Therefore, no one should try to be detached from Krishna consciousness at any stage of life. The whole purpose of detachment from all kinds of sense enjoyment is ultimately to become situated on the platform of Krishna consciousness. Hari Bol.
Haribol, thank you very much, Mr. Pravin. So what is being pointed out here is the regulated sense enjoyment, because once a living being has a material body, you know, sense enjoyment actually is a necessity. In other words, you have to eat, right? You have to eat. You have to smell something. You have to satisfy uh, your belly. You have to satisfy your genitals, etc. You know, so in the scriptures there is uh, a regulation, yeah, so that you will not veer away from your spiritual journey. You must follow some regulations. For instance, you know, sex. Sex is a necessity for reproduction, but uh, when you're engaged in spiritual activity, sex must be limited to one's marriage only. In other words, to one's wife or to one's husband only. Okay? Once a person uh, tries to enjoy sexual pleasure from other sources other than their husbands or their wives, then that is an offense. That is an offense. It makes a person uh, stone-hearted. In other words, a person becomes uh, he actually experiences difficulty in his spiritual journey. No, so he has to regulate himself. He has to regulate his activities, etc. You know, but then, even then, if a person is not um, careful, even if he is limited to having sex with his partner only in marriage, the tendency to the tendency to fall down is still there. That's why it is stated here in the Bhagavad Gita that a person must always be Krishna conscious or God conscious all the time, all the time. It, in other words, a married man or a married woman must not see this regulation as a type of license to enjoy sex uh, activity. It is described that one has to be engaged in sexual activity for the purpose of reproduction, for the purpose of having children, so that these children can become God conscious or living in God consciousness. Now, I know it is very difficult. It is difficult to control such sexual urge. But once a person is fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, he is able to give it up. In other words, he is able to control the urges of the senses or the urges of the sexual urge. Kasi ano yan it's actually a straight thing from here going down there. Ganon. The urge to eat, the the urge of the belly, the urge of sexual organs. So we must always be aware that you know even though a person may have the license, okay, to engage in such sexual activity limited to one's wife, still we have to be very careful uh, not to not to fall under the pretext of Maya, because there is a there is the problem of you know a person may use that as uh, limitation as a tool for his sexual urges. In other words, don't overdo it. Merong there is a regulation there. Follow the regulation. Overdoing means you use that license to engage in sexual activity like every day of your life or a couple of times every day, which will stunt you from your spiritual uh, emancipation. Okay, so the senses, the urge of the senses, the urge of the mind, the senses, the belly, and the genitals must always be controlled. Must always be controlled. At the most, use it sparingly. Sparingly. If you are married, but if you are not married, if you're a single person, okay, then you don't engage in any of this. You don't engage uh, in any sexual gratification. Now, if you can't control it, if you cannot control the urge to engage in sexual activity, there is a there is a there is a way to make it so that you can still continue your spiritual path, and that is you get married, you have somebody, okay, you have somebody to help you out, like your wife, your husband, and both of you understand very well the purpose of marriage, that it is supposed to be helping each other. It's helping each other uh, in their own spiritual enlightenment, in their engagement in Krishna consciousness, in devotional service, helping each other out. Other than that, you know, uh, it is actually a stumbling block spiritual for spiritual advancement. Okay, let's continue our reading. Yeah. Eric, would you like to read, Eric? It's it's on the screen. Kiel, Eric, are you there?
Hi, boss.
Maribol, can you read?
Wait lang, sir.
There's a screen. It's okay. Go ahead.
Nasa security, sir. That's 35.
Medyo hindi clear yung yung audio mo, Eric, as nahulog siya. Di bale. Okay, ikaw na lang magbasa. Ano, George? Will you please read it?
Very well, sir.
Nalaglag. Go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Continuation. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though they may be faulty, than another's duties. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. Purport. One should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness rather than those prescribed for others. Prescribed duties complement one's psycholo- psychophysical condition under the spell of the modes of material nature. Spiritual duties are as ordered by spiritual master for the transcendental service of Krishna, but both material or spiritually, one should stick to his prescribed duties even up to death, rather than imitate another's prescribed duties. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed rules for particular situations and should not imitate others. For example, a Brahmana who is in the mode of goodness is non-violent, whereas a Kshatriya who is in the mode of passion is allowed to be violent. As such, for a Kshatriya, it is better to be vanquished following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahman who follows the principles of non-violence. Everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. However, when one transcends the modes of material nature and is fully situated in Krishna consciousness, he can perform anything and everything under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the Kshatriya may act as a Brahman, or a Brahman may act as a Kshatriya. In the transcendental stage, the distinctions of the material world do not apply. For example, Visvamitra was originally a Kshatriya, but later on he acted as a Brahman, whereas Parasurama was a Brahman, but later on he acted as a Kshatriya. Being transcendentally situated, they could do so, but as long as one is in the material platform, he must perform his duties according to the modes of material nature. At the same time, he must have a full sense of Krishna consciousness. How about you?
Yeah. Haribol George, thank you very much. So this is actually very clear. Uh, um, George, text mo na lang si Eric. Yan, nalaglag yata siya. Sabi mo, it's okay. He can come back again. Okay, and just
It was
listen. All right. Okay, thank you. So this is a specific instruction, ano? Specific instruction that by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita that all of us we have our own individual prescribed duties. May prescribed duties talaga tayo. Yeah, sometimes we're we are in the mode of, let's say, according to our uh, physiological and psychological tendencies, we are gravitated towards being a kasatria, being a kasatria. Oh, so ano ka, the tendency is for you to use your prescribed duty. In other words, in the material platform, you have to engage in your specific prescribed duty. You're a kasatria, but at the same time, you try to copy, you try to imitate uh, what the Brahmanas are doing. The Brahmanas are simply just, studying the Vedas, engage in engage in talking to people like this, engage in engage in uh, devotional service 24/7, like that. In other words, if you're a kasatria, then uh, up to the point of death, you have to perform that duty because that is your prescribed duty. On the other hand, a brahmana may uh, may imitate or get a position of a kshatriya, which is actually detrimental, no, to his spiritual foundations. or spiritual advancement. Why is that so? Because he's supposed to be engaged only in devotional service, only in studying the Vedanta Sutras, like that. But, at the same time, he's trying to act as if he was a Kshatriya. Then it's not good, according to the Bhagavad Gita. It's not good to do that. Now, there is an exemption here. May exemption ito. The exemption is that if you're fully surrendered to Krishna and to your Gurudev, sometimes your Gurudev will instruct you to do something. Okay, he will instruct you to do something that may seem to be contradicting or a contradiction to your prescribed duty. But because that is the instruction of the spiritual master, you engage in it. And that is totally transcendental. Pwede po yun mangyari. Pwede yun. Yeah. For example, if you're a Kshatriya, uh, Kshatriya mode in your lifestyle, you're always talking about guns and knives, and you're talking about self-defense and martial arts, all this and that. Yeah. And all of a sudden, your spiritual master asks you to study the Vedas, asks you to asks you to go and preach the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. Then that is allowed. That is allowed because that is a totally different instruction. It is a transcendental instruction. Hindi yan nakabase sa our material conditions, because that is the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master. In other words, when a person is fully surrendered to Krishna, uh, and when he is given instructions by his spiritual master, that is his life and soul. That is his life and soul. Usually, the spiritual master sees your capabilities. He also sees how you engage yourself in your prescribed duties. Usually, the instruction is in line with your prescribed duties. That is usual. But there are times wherein the spiritual master asks you to do something else. No? And, you know, uh, and because it is the instruction of the spiritual master, you go ahead and follow that instruction. That is transcendental. That is totally beyond material so-called engagement. That is devotional service. Devotional service pa rin yun. That can actually raise you up, raise you even more as a devotee of Krishna. Because really, in spiritual life, the key to spiritual success, the key to spiritual success is uh, following the instructions of the spiritual master. Even though it may seem that it is not, parang wala akong alam dyan, I'm not very uh, adept at that type of instruction. But because that is the instruction of the spiritual master, he wants you to do it, just like Arjuna, Krishna was telling him to go and fight and, become a Kshatriya. defend defend the innocents like this. In the beginning, he was hesitant to do that. Parang there's something wrong here because when I go to war, I would be killing somebody. When I engage uh, in warfare, I cannot help it but kill somebody. So he was kind of like against it, and Krishna had to convince him. You know, why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? I'm afraid, Krishna, because I'm afraid that I may be able to kill uh, my some of my mentors, my relatives, my cousins, like that. You know, and some dear friends who are in the other side of the battlefield. In other words, kalaban nila. But Krishna was insistent. He was saying, you know, uh, um, you do this for a certain purpose. There's a purpose why I am asking you to fight. You know, and there was a time that Arjuna decided to just run off from the battlefield and go to the mountains and just meditate there, no? Ganyan. And uh, Krishna actually chastised him, chastised him terribly, um, because running from your prescribed duty um, is not only sinful. Running away from your prescribed duty is not only sinful, but also um, it will destroy your dignity as a person. That's why, it was very difficult for him in the beginning to go ahead and you know uh, and pursue this battle of Kurukshetra. He was very hesitant in the beginning because he was thinking, if I fight and I was able to kill my own kinsmen, all right, my even my teachers, what will the society think of me? He was thinking like this, he was thinking about what's going to happen, uh, win or lose. If I win, I will be damned. If I lose, I will be damned as well. If I run away from the battle, I will be damned. So he is, he doesn't have any choice. That's why he was sweating very terribly. He was like trembling, and he even, you know, um, his his bow and arrow, fell down. It fell down from his grip because of severe um, fear. He was so afraid. So what he was thinking was that this is, in fact, he even debated with Krishna. Krishna, this is not the proper dharma. This is not the proper religious principles. You're asking me to kill. You're asking me this and that. And what would happen to the, um, let's say, the widows, the children? Yeah, he was thinking very, very uh, mundane, so-called morality. But actually, Krishna, He has his own reason why, up, you know, is why you should fight. Okay pa ba ako? Can you still hear me?
Herbal, sir, yes po.
Kasi nagkaroon ng unstable eh. Unstable na yung aking ano. So, in other words, generally, we have to follow our own uh, prescribed duties. Yung prescribed duty natin, yung ating uh, situation ngayon. You know, like if you're a mother, be a mother. If you're like a businessman, be a businessman. If you're an artist, be an artist because that is your prescribed duty. And Bhagavad Gita is telling us if you engage in your prescribed duty, you have to dovetail it with Krishna in order for that to become spiritual. Yeah. If you're a teacher, be a teacher. If you're a Brahmana, be a Brahmana. Like that. Yeah. But always dovetail it in the service of Krishna. That way, uh, you are not only following the Vedic injunctions of prescribed duties, but you're actually elevating it. Uh, you're elevating yourself to be engaged in spiritual activity. Natatranscend mo lahat yan because you are offering it to Krishna, offering your life, your activity to Krishna. And therefore, it is very, very pleasing in the eyes of Krishna. Yun lang, sometimes, during our devotee lives, we are given instructions by the spiritual master. Sometimes may not be as may not be as to our liking, but because that is the instruction of the spiritual master, you nevertheless do it for his pleasure. And that is even more pleasing. Okay? Let's read further. Alinat, would you like to read?
Haribo, Namaste.
Please.
Text 36, translation. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Purport. A living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme is originally spiritual, pure and free from all material contaminations. Therefore, by nature, he is not subjected to the sins of the material world. But when he is in contact with the material nature, he acts in many simple ways without hesitation, and sometimes even against his will. As such, Arjuna's question to Krishna is very sanguine as to the perverted nature of the living entities. Although the living entity sometimes does not want to act in sin, he is still forced to act. Sinful actions are not, however, impelled by the super soul within, but are due to another cause, as the Lord explains in the next verse. Hari po.
Sige, sige,
Bla-
basahin mo yung next verse.
The blessed
Basahin mo yung
Lord
next
said, Opo. The blessed Lord said, It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material modes of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. Purport. When a living entity comes in contact with material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in association with the mode of passion, or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust. as milk is contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. Wrath is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues the material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity, and it is lust only which induces the pure living entity to remain entangled in the material world. Wrath is the manifestation of the mode of ignorance. This mode and these modes exhibit themselves as wrath and other corollaries. If therefore the mode of passion, instead of being degraded into the modes of ignorance, are elevated to the mode of goodness by the prescribed method of living and acting, then one can be saved from the degradation of wrath by spiritual attachment. The Supreme Personality of Godhead expanded Himself into many for His ever increasing spiritual bliss, and the living entities are parts and parcel of this spiritual bliss. They also have partial independence, but by misuse of their independence, when the service attitude is transformed into the propensity for sense enjoyment, they come under the sway of lust. This material creation is created by the Lord to give a facility to the conditioned souls to fulfill their lustful propensities. Excuse me po. Krishna. And they and when they are completely baffled by prolonged lustful activities, the living entities begin to inquire about their real position. This inquiry is the beginning of the Vedanta Sutras, wherein it is said, Ato Brahma Jijnasa, one should inquire into the Supreme. And the Supreme is defined in Srimad Bhagavatam as Janmadyasya Yatom Envayad Itaras Itaratas Cha, or the origin of everything is the Supreme Brahman. Therefore, the origin of lust is also in the Supreme. If therefore lust is transformed into love for the Supreme, or transformed into Krishna consciousness, or, in other words, desiring everything for Krishna, then both lust and wrath can be spiritualized. Hanuman, the great servitor of Lord Rama, engaged in wrath upon his enemies for the satisfaction of the Lord. Therefore, lust and wrath, when they are employed in Krishna consciousness, become our friends instead of our enemies. Salamat po.
Salamat din, Alinat. So, this is actually a very vital uh, verse in the Bhagavad Gita, no, wherein Arjuna was asking Krishna, "What is this force that that inside me, Krishna? What is this? What is this force that impels me to engage in activity, even if it is against my will? What is this force?" You know, uh, and all of us know this. Sometimes we are just forced to engage in activity. We are forced to engage in activity or in activities that may appear to be even uh, not to our liking. We don't want to do it, but we are forced to do it like this. And Krishna is saying that um, it is not that it is actually wrath, uh, wrath and anger, okay, which leads to lust. So this all of us, we are all spiritual beings, and we are all devotees of Krishna. But because we decided using our little independence, okay, using that freedom uh, to serve or not to serve Krishna, we chose not to serve Krishna. We chose to run away from him, okay, and therefore we are now controlled by Maya, and Maya shows us how to serve her by following our lust. So actually this love which is in our hearts, no? Parang ano yan sa atin, that is our nature. Our nature really is to love. But it becomes distorted. It becomes distorted and becomes lust. So it is lust only, Arjuna, which is the all devouring enemy of man. So this lust becomes our enemy because we don't want to do certain things, but we are just forced to engage in it. We're forced, okay? We don't want to do it, but we are forced to do it. So therefore, it is not our friend. It is not our friend. It is our enemy. The lust is our enemy. But this lust, when it is tamed and engaged in Krishna consciousness, engaged in devotional service, it transforms itself into its original state, and that is love. Actually, lust is love, but distorted. Distorted yan. Because it is um, it is controlled by our desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. Controlled by Maya. Maya tells you to do this, yeah, in the form of lust. So even though you don't want to engage in those lusty activities, you're simply forced to engage in it. So what impels a person to engage in activity uh, even though it is against his will is simply lust. In other words, a person must um, be aware in his everyday life. He has to be aware of these things. Last lang ito. This is not my natural condition. My natural condition is love, actually. This is my natural condition. But right now I am uh, captivated. I'm captivated and controlled by lust. Yeah. And in our in our next class, we are going to explain uh, step by step what happens when lust is developed. When lust is developed, what happens after that. Yeah. Anger arises like that. And then if you are not going to control this, you fall down again into the pit of material consciousness, into the pit of the ocean of birth and death in the material world. You go back again to this sinful habits. So in the very beginning, you have to curb this lust according to Krishna. Curb it. Diyan pa lang, nasa mind pa lang, you have to curb it immediately. Don't play along with it because a lot of people, they play along with it, Maya steers their mind into thinking, oh, it's yummy. I will be able to be happy engaging in this, etc. And then you try to play along with that thought. Okay, what happens is that it can actually destroy your spiritual life. Mm. Okay, so uh, uh, hanggang dito na lang muna tayo. We are going to continue our discussion next Saturday. Haribo, my daughter. You have questions regarding this? Meron kayong questions? Elinette, would you be kind enough to do the exit kirtan, please?
Haribo, try ko po. Krishna, Krishna.
Try mo.
Ah,
Okay naman sound mo. Very, very clear.
Tama Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya, Bhutale, Srimati Siddha, Swarupananda, Paramahamsa iti namine. Nama Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya, Bhutale, Srimati Siddha, Swarupananda, Paramahamsa iti namine. Namo Siddha, Swarupananda, Paramahamsa namine. Ora Karuna Swarupaya, Radha Krishna Prasthaya De, Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Haribo, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Haribo, Haribo, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Haribo, Haribo, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Haribo. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Bol, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Hare Bol, Jaya Jaya, Gurudev, Jaya Jaya, Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya, Gurudev, Jaya Jaya, Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya, Gurudev, Jaya Jaya, Srila Prabhupada. Haribol, Haribol. Salamat po. Haribol.
Haribol, thank you very much, Lynette, for that wonderful kirtan. Uh, while you are doing the kirtan, may pumasok na question. So I'll just address this one question, yes? The question is, how about if the spiritual master instructed you to do 12 rounds on your beads? Can you go beyond 12 rounds per day? Okay, that's the question. Actually, there is no problem. Like my spiritual masters has given me 14 rounds to chant on my beads. And sometimes, like not on a busy days, umaga pa lang tapos na ako sa 14 rounds ko eh. Because I I I do a lot of walking like that and I carry my beads with me. So natatapos ko na yung 14 rounds. And throughout the day, if I find myself parang not doing anything, I still carry my beads and I chant. I chant, sometimes another 10 rounds or another 8 rounds. That's all right. That is totally allowable. Wala pong problema yun. What is problem is you don't finish your 12 rounds. Like the spiritual master asks you to chant 12 rounds, and then you're only doing like 5 rounds a day, or like 8 rounds a day, ganyan, no? Um, if you're a disciple, you have to always follow the instructions of the spiritual master. Kung hindi mo nagawa, you have to pray to the spiritual master and ask for forgiveness. My dear spiritual master, my dear Gurudev, dear Srila Prabhupada, I have failed to follow your instructions uh, for the specified number of rounds that I have to chant on my beats, like that. So uh, please forgive me, Srila Prabhupada, and I promise to finish it from this day on. Ganon. If you're a non-disciple, you're still a student, the protocol is for you to set up a certain number of rounds, no, and that is allowed. Like you can promise Krishna that you're going to chant for like 10 rounds or 12 rounds or 14 rounds. Depends on you. Kung anong kaya mo. But since you have given your commitment to that number of rounds, then you have to follow that commitment. Okay. Now, if you're a not yet a disciple and you are not able to finish that promise that you said you're going to chant, okay, um, then you can reset. You can reset the number of rounds. You have to pray to Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. Krishna, I'm not able to uh, do my promise of chanting these numbers of rounds. Can I lower it down? You can do that. Oh, sige, 8 rounds na lang. But when you reset it, you have to finish it. Huwag ka mag-reset tapos hindi mo rin pala na nagagawa. Reset it, like if you find yourself very, very busy, oh, sige, kahit na 6 rounds na lang. Yeah, I'm going to chant. And then probably towards the end of the year, uh, towards the middle of the year, like this, I can increase it. I can increase it to another numbers of rounds. Pwede yan if you are not a disciple. But if you're a disciple, the spiritual master has given you the number of rounds to chant. Usually it is 12, 14, and 16. Usually. Yeah. Myself, I was given the instruction to chant 14 rounds a day. Yeah. Okay? So hanggang doon na lang tayo. George, okay na yon?
Thank you po, sir. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Bol. So, thank you very much for your assistance. Thank you, Mr. Pravin, for reading.
Maraming salamat
Salamat.
po.
Walang anuman, Mr. Pravin. Elinet for the kirtan and for the reading also. Maraming salamat.
Thank you po. Namaste, everyone.
Haribo, Jaya Krishna. Okay, I'll see you again next Saturday. All right? Jaya Krishna, Jaya Nitai Gaur. Take care of yourselves and have a blessed weekend ahead of you.
Haribol.
Okay, sana ba? Haribol, namaste. Sana ba? How can I?